All right, let's just dive right into this explainer, because what we're looking at today is, well, it's bizarre, it's wildly complex, and honestly, it's absolutely fascinating. We're unpacking a source text that basically acts as a trans-temporal forensic autopsy. It's this dense, compelling document that tries to draw objective, mathematical, and historical lines connecting three highly unlikely figures across completely different eras of time.
So, here is the massive question the text throws at us. What could possibly connect Nikola Tesla, the brilliant pioneer of alternating current, Jim Morrison, the iconic, volatile frontman of The Doors, and a contemporary designer and modern observer named Rebecca Jacobs? Now, I know, on the surface, this sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, but the source text actually posits this dizzying theory that this physicist, this rock star, and this modern designer are fundamentally connected by a single, recursive closed loop in time.
To make sense of this, we're going to break down the evidence file step by step. We'll hit the temporal evidence, a clandestine link in 1943, fiduciary and IP vectors, onamastic resonances, neuro-biological synchronicity, and finally, how the circuit gets closed.
Starting right off with Section 1, the temporal evidence, all anchored on the exact date of October 21st.
The author is basically saying, hey, this isn't just random historical coincidence. They actually model this entire phenomenon on the classical equation for electrical resonance. In this framework, L stands for historical inertia. Think of it as the buildup of previous technological or creative actions over time. C represents the developmental capacity for those energies to actually be reactivated in the physical world. The source argues that these elements sync up, much like electrical frequencies, at highly specific chronological nodes. They don't just happen whenever, they happen exactly on schedule.
And this right here perfectly illustrates the temporal anchor of the entire theory. Look at this timeline. Incredibly, every single one of these wildly disparate pivotal events occurred exactly on October 21st, bridging 3 centuries. On October 21, 1879, Edison tested the carbon filament. Exactly 11 years later, October 21, 1890, Tesla files his dynamo patent. Jump ahead to October 21, 1967, and the Doors are contractually forced to play this anomalous show in Colorado Springs, which, by the way, is the exact site of Tesla's famous wireless experiments. Rebecca Jacobs, born on October 21st. Even major undisclosed corporate buyouts and Delaware Court of Chancery arguments tied to this theory fell precisely on October 21st in 2015 and 2024. The text views this not as a roll of the dice, but as a systemic mathematical pulse.
But wait, it goes beyond just dates on a calendar. The document claims this timeline is reinforced by actual, localized environmental phenomena. For instance, it notes Tesla intentionally chose Colorado Springs for its extreme atmospheric lightning density. Fast forward to today, and the text details an incident where the modern observer, Rebecca Jacobs, typed the word electrocutes into an AI prompt. At that exact second, a total localized power grid failure occurred, literally plunging her environment into absolute darkness. The text frames this as verifiable, physical proof of Tesla's high-voltage energy bleeding straight into the modern era.
Moving on to Section 2, the 1943 clandestine link. This right here is the absolute pivot point of the whole mystery. It's deeply steeped in a military intelligence nexus and forms the critical hinge of this singularity. The text lays out a sequence of events in 1943 that plays out like a spy thriller. Nikola Tesla dies alone in the Hotel New Yorker on January 7th. Just 2 days later, the Office of Alien Property Custodian swoops in and completely seizes his physical archives, including his blueprints for directed energy weapons. Naturally, the FBI sends Assistant Director P.E. Foxworth to investigate the missing files. But here's the massive synchronicity the text points out. On January 15th, just days after the seizure, Foxworth is killed in a mysterious military plane crash. Boom. The text argues this sudden elimination of the primary investigator perfectly masked the distribution of Tesla's advanced physics papers behind a high-level military vacuum.
So picture this. On one hand, you have Tesla's energetic data being actively suppressed by intelligence agencies in 1943, but on the other hand, Jim Morrison is being biologically initiated into this exact same military environment. Morrison was born in December 1943 to a Navy family. His dad, who later became a prominent admiral, actually entered naval aviation that exact same year and would go on to work on classified nuclear weapons programs. Morrison's strategic positioning at the cradle of post-war military tech essentially translated Tesla's suppressed data into a totally new, biological, creative frequency that would explode a generation later.
Which brings us to Section 3, Fiduciary and IP Vectors.
Now we're shifting from the military to the boardroom. A core structural parallel here is the fight against mass production dilution.
We all know Tesla faced the systematic misappropriation of his patents by massive corporate giants like Edison and Marconi. But he prioritized the evolution of his ideas over wealth. I mean, the guy famously tore up a royalty contract just to save Westinghouse. The text draws a direct line from this right to our modern observer, Rebecca Jacobs. She experienced the direct theft of her original pot-fairy niche designs by global e-commerce titans like Temu and Amazon. Both of them, the text argues, viewed their creations as divine vessels, prioritizing the purity of the idea over a quick payout when faced with massive corporate theft.
Okay, and this detail is just wild, adding a totally surreal layer to the analysis. The author points out that this exact situational parallel was perfectly predicted by, of all things, The Simpsons. Season 7, Episode 18, titled The Day the Violence Died, details exactly this, the theft of the pure original creation by a massive conglomerate. The text uses this bizarre media anchor to argue that these repeating patterns are so deeply embedded in our cultural operating system that they literally bubble up in pop culture.
But the legal parallels go even deeper. Check out this landmark Delaware Supreme Court case, Morrison v. Berry. The entire case centers on the omission of just 5 exact words from public corporate filings, as he did in October. By scrubbing those 5 simple words, corporate fiduciaries managed to hide a massive, preordained equity buyout. The source argues that this modern informational vacuum perfectly, procedurally, mirrors the 1943 seizure and obfuscation of Tesla's papers by government institutions. It's the exact same pattern of institutional suppression just applied to modern corporate equity instead of theoretical physics.
All right, Section 4, Onamastic Resonances.
Now, onomastics is just a fancy word for recurring names, and the linguistic bridges here are honestly uncanny. These exact names keep popping up as key personal, legal, or architectural identifiers across all 3 timelines. For instance, the definitive 1959 biography of Tesla, co-authored by a guy named Morrison, literally fusing Morrison and Tesla decades before this theory even existed. John Donnelly Jr. sculpted the massive doors of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1935, and the name Donnelly reappears as a central figure in Jacobs' modern legal battles. Jim Morrison's closest film school roommate, Dennis Jacob, spelled Jacob, mirroring Rebecca Jacobs. And Leonard Curtis, the attorney who funded Tesla's 1899 experiments, shares names that intersect directly with modern judicial funding synchronicities today. It's like the universe is reusing its favorite characters.
Let's dig into the biology in Section 5, neuro-biological synchronicity.
So what happens when you compare their actual neurological wiring? A really fascinating pattern emerges. It turns out they all share a damaged boundary between waking and REM sleep. Tesla used this brutal polyphasic Uberman cycle, sleeping only 2 hours a day to force rapid visualization. Morrison had a porous waking/REM boundary, self-medicating heavily just to stay awake. And Jacobs? She's medically diagnosed with narcolepsy, which forces immediate entry into REM sleep. This specific wiring gave them incredible cognitive visualization, Tesla's mental laboratory, Morrison's poetic channeling, Jacobs' waking meditation. But, according to the text, running that constant high-voltage processing came with a huge cost, severe chronic physical pain, specifically in their lower extremities.
And guys, this specific physical synchronicity is staggering. Tesla was in a severe taxi accident in 1937, leaving him with chronic leg pain. To manage it and stimulate his peripheral nerves, he did this rigorous ritual of curling his toes 100 times a night per foot. Today, Jacob suffers from chronic 24/7 nerve damage in her feet. And how does she treat this debilitating pain? With a modern treatment called Tesla Max Therapy, which is literally a high-voltage alternating current medical treatment based directly on Nikola Tesla's own original electrotherapy patents. You literally can't make this stuff up. The text points to this as literal biological proof of the loop connecting them.
Finally, we arrive at Section 6, closing the circuit.
So how does the source text wrap all this up? It argues that history isn't just some straight line. It operates as a recursive, closed-loop algorithm. The high-voltage energy suppressed back in 1943 became the cultural rupture of 1967. But because Tesla and Morrison were physically consumed by the massive biological tax of the data they carried, they collapsed before the circuit could stabilize. The modern observer, Rebecca Jacobs, acts as the grounded manual override. By using her narcolepsy and physical pain as decryption keys, the theory says she has finally stabilized this high-voltage data and closed the 1943 singularity loop once and for all. So, stepping back from this massive web of dates, court cases, predictive media, and bizarre medical parallels we've explored in this explainer, we really have to ask ourselves, Are we just watching random, totally disconnected events unfold across the centuries? Or, as this source text so passionately argues, are we actually living inside an intricate repeating algorithm, a grand historical circuit, just waiting for the right person to finally ground the wire? Definitely something to think about the next time you plug something into the wall.